Greetings. I get quite a few messages and people asking me about autism, and it's almost like the elephant in the room sometimes, and people seem to feel embarrassed and awkward about asking me things and things they want to know, and then on the other side of the coin there is people who have the most, to my mind, bizarre assumptions, preconceptions about autism and the stereotypes. So what I want to do in this video is just a few quick pointers to what autism is and how it affects me specifically and how it may affect others, because then there's always the question of, oh, I know someone who's probably autistic, how do I tell? Well, the short answer is you take for a fucking diagnosis, but we'll come to that in a minute. First thing is, autism is a developmental disorder. It's a neurological disorder. It's in the brain. You're born like it. Okay, you don't kind of catch it like a disease, which is why I prefer to be called autistic rather than someone with autism. It is an intrinsic part of me. The only people who seem to say don't be defined by your autism are people who are not autistic. You'll find every autistic person, certainly every autistic person I've ever met, takes it as part of their identity. It's part of what we are. I mean, it's the same as being, I don't know, black or gay or tall or short, or I guess some kind of, for patriots, if you're English or Irish or whatever, it is part of what you are. You know, you are born that way and you die that way. So it's part of our identity. Because we know it is almost certainly all genetic or mostly genetic, but there may be some environmental factors that help express those genes. We also know vaccines are not one of them. So if you want to annoy me, one of the quickest and easiest ways to do that is to ask me about vaccines. You're inviting a punch in the throat if you do that. The second thing is, because it's a developmental disorder and you're born with it and it's genetic, there is no cure. There's not even treatment for most of it. Okay, I'll give you the caveat to that in a moment. But sometimes, or often even, it will come alongside or along with mental health issues. I mean, it is not in itself a mental health issue either, but it will come alongside mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, PTSD, OCD, ADHD, and various others, some of which are mental health issues and some of which are not. And some of those mental health issues and other disorders have treatments available. But there is no treatment per se for autism itself. Apart from anything else, it's not just one disorder, it's a whole catalogue of disorders I should come to in a moment. They all add up to a single diagnosis. So you can have someone who is, say, presents like me, there's nothing to treat, okay? But you could have someone whose motor neurological presentation is very poor, meaning, I don't know, maybe they cannot self-care, or there may be treatments for that help calm them down a little bit, for instance. Okay, but there is no single pill you can take to treat autism. Okay, what you're doing is often treating some very specific traits or elements of the different traits, 7 categories of traits. You're treating certain elements of those, and it's not appropriate for everyone. So there is no cure, there's no real treatment either. And you'll also find most autistics don't want a cure. I can see why some do, some because they suffer from severe concomitant things like depression and anxiety. Others struggle in their lives to a huge extent, and some are so physically disabled by it, I can see why they would want a cure, and I can see what their parents would want too. Now, it's not for me to judge. I personally, and many of the people I know, wouldn't want one even if there was one available. Okay, I like being this way. It's fucking great. Now, to kind of continue from this, every single autistic person you meet is different. Now imagine there's say there's about 7 main categories. If there are only 5 different presentations within each category, so 5 different ways you can be affected, say, or 5 different elements to that, well, that's 16,000 different presentations as a whole. Well, there are many, many more. There are probably more presentations possible because of the way it's diagnosed and the way it's defined than there are human beings on the planet. So if you meet one autistic person like me, you've met one autistic person. And while some of us may be similar in some ways, we're also very different, just like real people. Yesterday I took my friend up to Cork, he was diagnosed himself. He's got the similar presentation to me, but there are also substantial differences. For instance, he sees mathematics and things as a visual representation. I don't. I tend to feel them more as a kinesthetic thing. Okay, well, that's a very, very different presentation, certainly on the inside. It may not be different from the outside, but it's certainly different on the inside. And because we are all different, that comes from the way autism is represented as a spectrum. Now, there's a big misunderstanding with this. Okay, most people look at autism as being a spectrum, thinking it's a gradient, meaning at one end you've got mild, simple autism, and at the other end you've got severe autism. That's not how it is at all. Okay, it's just like trying to mix a colour palette with light. Okay, your specific presentation of autism will depend on all the different bits and pieces from each of these 7 categories. So it's like a rainbow. Okay, it is a spectrum, it is not a gradient. So it is not correct to say, because you see me now talking to you almost like a normal neurotypical person, I have mild autism. That's not correct. Because where my autism might be severe, say, is in some social interactions, in dealing with sensory overload, and maybe 1 or 2 other things. Whereas someone who looks like they've got severe autism, because their neuromotor presentation is difficult, so they cannot self-care, say, you'd say, well, they've got severe autism. No, because in some ways, say, their social awareness and things might be much better than mine, only you can't see that. So autism is actually defined by what's going on in here, not what you see on the outside. So when you say to me, oh, you're high functioning, or you've only got mild autism, I find that really frustrating and irritating. I'm not offended. I'm not offended by anything. But it's not offensive, but it's irritating and frustrating because you can't see how much I'm struggling on the inside. So in, say, an airport, it's very difficult for me to hold it together because there's just so much going on. All right. In a busy gym, if the noise is loud and people are dropping weights and things, it's like a physical blow. If there's lots of people all trying to get my attention, I don't know any of them, it's really complicated because I'm trying to read, I can't read facial expressions very well, I can't read body language, and I can make eye contact. It's not uncomfortable to make eye contact, but it's difficult because if I'm looking at your face and you're talking to me, I'm not listening to you. I'm trying to process what's going on. So I kind of tend to look down like this when I'm listening to you. So all those things make life sometimes quite difficult, and for me that's when it's frustrating when people say, oh, but you're high functioning. Even worse, because I can present almost neurotypical in many situations, people are disbelieving or skeptical, or to come to the next point, they'll say, well, I feel like that as well sometimes, I think you're overreacting, or I think I might be a little bit autistic. You can't be a little bit autistic, or, and this is the one that really annoys me, everyone's a little bit autistic. No, they're not. To get a diagnosis, you have to, it's a subjective diagnosis in many ways, especially the older you are, but it's also objectively scored. You have to present, you have to experience significant difficulties in various parts of each of these 7 categories. If you don't, you won't get the diagnosis, you'll be diagnosed with something else. So, for instance, neuromotor, I'm not severely affected there, but enough that it impacts my life. I'm very, very clumsy. My handwriting's appalling, for instance. My social awareness is pretty crap. My language understanding is excellent. I mean, I'm a superb writer, even though I say so myself. But I also tend to take things literally. I mean, in the gym last night, my PT Brendan said about just some weights. He said, "All right, now you got the exercise right. Pick them up and run with it." And I says, I can't run with that. What would you run for? I literally thought he wanted me to run around the gym with the weights. Well, no, he laughed at me, quite rightly, and said, you take things literally. Yeah, I do. What he meant was, do the exercise. You know the exercise, so perform it. That's just a small example. But that kind of thing is hilarious, and it happens all the time. So to say everyone's a little bit autistic, to go back to that one, it's completely incorrect, and it's not mild. And you're not a little bit autistic. It's like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. You can be just pregnant, so it's not showing, or heavily pregnant and fit to drop, but you're still pregnant all the way through. If you're not pregnant, you're not carrying a fetus. Well, it's a bit like that with autism. you can have autism, or you can be autistic to the point where it's obvious from the outside, or it can be not obvious from the outside. But inside, you're autistic, all right, or not. There's no half measures. There's no question about it. Everyone is not a little bit autistic. Apart from anything else, it makes no sense, because if it's a disorder, then there must be some point at which we say this person is normal, this person is not normal, and so has a disorder. Well, normality is just going to be an accepted configuration of neurons within certain parameters, where people have said, yeah, we'll take that as being normal. There's probably a statistical, I can't remember what they call it now, deviation, standard deviations. So many deviations, so much percentage of the world will be like this, and the rest are not. And those who are not are outliers, and we'll call them autistic. That's what it is. So, you know, to say everyone is a bit autistic makes no fucking sense. Because if everyone was autistic, no one's autistic. Because there is no disorder. Because, you know, it's bonkers. Now, that's not to say we're broken neurotypicals. Because this is a big mistake I made. And I think they're making today in most of the way they help children and the support you get. They teach kids and adults to fit in. I think it's the wrong thing. We shouldn't fit in. We should strive to be included on our terms and not yours. That's the crucial difference. Because, you know, we never become less autistic. All we do is we get better at dealing with it and better at pretending. Okay, so for instance, my affective empathy is virtually zero. My cognitive empathy is not brilliant. I could probably learn to pretend to have empathy and you know, emotional contagion. But that's all I'd be doing. It wouldn't be real. So I don't see, it helps no one for me to try. All right? Just don't judge me for having no empathy. Well, you can if you like, but, you know, it's completely unreasonable. It's like judging a blind man because he can't see. And the last thing is, if you ever want to know anything, just ask me. All right? I am not precious about it at all. I know a lot of autistic people keep it under wraps. Some are in denial, some are embarrassed, some are ashamed, some think it's a stain on the family honour. I don't care about any of that. I will ask for help in the most ridiculous of times, any time, because I want the help. I've struggled with it for years, and I found the easiest way for me to deal with it is to ask for help when I need it, because otherwise you get into meltdown territory, and they are not pretty. Meltdowns or shutdowns are bloody horrible for everybody. I am completely open about it. I make a song and dance about it in my business for very good reasons that have nothing to do with attention seeking per se, but they're good for business. I also, in other parts of my business, want to go into lecturing in schools, colleges and universities, and consulting in companies. So obviously I'm going to be shouting about it. But if there's something you want to know, don't feel embarrassed or think I'm going to be embarrassed, just ask me. The worst thing you can do is ask me a stupid question and I'll just look at you as if to say that was a really stupid question. The other thing, or another thing, is it is serious because it has some serious effects on my life and those around me, and autism affects people's lives very seriously. I can't speak for them, I can only speak for myself. But while it's serious, don't be solemn about it, alright? People who know me, they know I'm not precious about it, and they will laugh, like when I take things literally, when I'm clumsy, when I can be apparently rude and abrupt to people. Laugh about it, alright? I won't be offended by it. I know it's ridiculous. I know it's funny. I find it funny too. Let's not pretend. Let's not treat it like this big elephant in the room that everyone has to pretend I'm normal, because I ain't. All right, I'm not neurotypical. I'm never going to be neurotypical, and I'm perfectly okay with that. So if I do something that you find is funny, laugh, because I will. And it's not like well, you might be laughing at me, but I'll be laughing at myself as well. And I think if you can't laugh at yourself, you can't laugh at anyone. So that's it really, just 5 quick things about autism you probably didn't know. If you want to know more, comment below on my blog, or just ask me. Alright, see you later. Ta-da.